Okay, so I've been struggling for the past hour to get this freaking file to freaking download to my device. I don't know why it happened, but the first 8-minute clip of this video did not download onto my device, and so it is crappy quality, and I'm really sorry. Also, this is crappy quality because it's on my computer. Anyway, sorry. I'm back. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, Mary, 2 videos in the same day? Well, that's mostly to make up for the literal year that I have not been publishing videos, so... I mean, if you saw my description from about 2 minutes ago before I edited it, it actually said book reviews and writing tips from an inexperienced 15-year-old. And I'm 16 now, so sorry. But anyway, my name is Mary Catherine Payne, and today I'm going to be talking about why it's so hard to publish things. Now, writing is hard. I mean, that's obvious. If it were easier, there would be more people with books out there. In fact, I saw a statistic done a while ago that showed just how many people actually think they have a book in them. They just haven't bothered to write it. And it's almost everyone. But just people not writing isn't the reason why there aren't that many books. I mean, there is a frick ton of books, but it's why not everyone has a book. Getting things published is hard. And it's partially because, there's so many publishing companies that writers just throw it out there and just hope for the best. And then there's so many writers going to publishing companies that they don't have time to read all of them, and they can't give everything that they want to a chance. That's why most authors start out writing and they get things published, but they aren't really all that great until they get that one book that's a breakthrough, and then they suddenly get famous. Most authors have books that didn't do so well. They have books that really were failures. The only real exception to this that I can think of is J.K. Rowling, and she's a complete outlier in most things, so, That's also why you don't really see that many young authors, is mostly because, I don't know if you've ever really heard of a prodigy writer, but they don't really exist. Mostly because writing is a skill that needs to be developed, and development can only come with time and practice and experience. Most people don't have this, and it's hard to get unless you're actively trying to get it. I mean, I've never been able to publish anything, and I've tried. Right now I'm working on something that I think I might be able to get published. I just have to edit it a bit more, and then we're gonna see what magazines and youth, groups want to actually publish my work. In fact, the only thing I've ever actually gotten published is a screenplay that I wrote in 6th grade that was produced into a 5-minute little movie thing, and it's not even that good. But me, like most people, am trying to publish things before I actually try to get a novel or a book published. Because that's easier for most people to do, and most publishers would want to publish an actual novel once they find out you've written 20 short stories. That's a useful thing to have. But writing is one of the hardest professions. I would say, in terms of just being able to succeed. I understand brain surgeon and that kind of stuff, that's really, really hard, but that can be taught. And it's much easier to get a job based on things you know than just the off chance that maybe someone will like what you're doing. That's mostly why the arts are so underappreciated, because they just feel like something that can't be taught and that most people might not enjoy. So when we're talking about writing things and why it's so hard to actually get published and get out there and show your skill, it's because it's a thing that most people have to enjoy. If what you're doing is niche and like for a specific group of people, you have a pretty high risk of not getting your thing published. So, how do you get published if it's so hard? I mean, the best advice I can give you is to just keep writing and keep trying, and eventually you'll get something. And that's not to say that you'll get famous, it's just maybe you'll get something published and like 10,000 people will read it. And that's not bad. That's actually really good for someone who isn't like, you know, a YA best-selling author. And there's multiple different ways to get published. You can go to a publishing company, or you can choose the other route, which is self-publishing. I have several friends who have actually been able to do this, who have actually published things and people read them. But it is self-publishing, and it's a bit harder because it's all at your expense. I mean, if people aren't interested in reading it, you're probably going to lose money. Plus, plus you have to handle all of your own advertising. Some publishing companies make you handle your own advertising, but like depending on what publishing company, they might like help you with that stuff. But with self-publishing, it's all you. You have to find people to actually print it and to advertise it and read it and just figure out how to get it out there. Which is why, if you're going into the publishing company part of this, you're gonna want to have a few publications under your belt. Short story publishing is actually one of the best ways to do this. It's one of the most put out there ways to do it. It's one of the like tips that I've heard a lot of writers give young authors. There are kids coming this direction, and by kids I mean my brothers and their friends, so I'm gonna move place. Hope this is good enough. Anyway, so the reason why it's so hard is just... Oh, that's not what I was talking about, was it? Short stories is one of the ways that most writers just say is a good idea, especially for up-and-coming authors. Because there's so many different options. With short story publishing, sometimes you get paid, sometimes you don't, sometimes you have to pay them, but all in all, it's still a publication, and that's why a lot of people do it. And I mean, of course, there are like contests and stuff where you can get things published, which is a great idea if you want to do that, but again, there's still the big chance you're not actually gonna win. Which is why it's such a good idea to actually do that, because it's hard. Sorry, completely off tangent, but my brother just recommended I do Minecraft videos. Come here, my dude. Wave hi. Hi. Family friend. Anyway, so that's writing short stories is one of the ways that people get out there and just, get a publication under their belt. And this is hard too. Again, it's trying to get something published, which is hard. And to get something published, to get something else published, might just not feel great. Most people have this one idea for a really good book that they really, really, really want to write, and then they go to try to get it published, and they're declined. Which is a heartbreaking feeling, because you worked so hard on this piece of work just to get turned down, and that really, really sucks. Which is why a lot of people tend to give up. Which, if they give up, it's unlikely that they would have been able to get anything published in the first place. I mean, if they just give up from not being published, they wouldn't have tried to read. They wouldn't have just kept trying, So, giving up is the thing you shouldn't do if you want to get something published. Goodness. Just because it's hard doesn't mean you don't have a chance. Which is why you gotta keep going. You just need to keep writing and just continue on that trail. Keep trying to get published. Keep trying to write something good. And eventually you'll get something published. It may not get famous or become a widely acclaimed novel, but I mean, at least you have something out there, and that's something to be proud of. I mean, getting something published, you ought to celebrate that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? I mean, in 6th grade, when I got my little screenplay published, like it won the contest, I was so freaking happy. I was overjoyed. And I wrote it with 2 of my best friends, and we just loved writing it. And that was the point. And even if you do have, like, a big novel published, it's always good to keep going back to the short stories, because you're always going to have ideas that won't really ever amount to a book. There are ideas that just aren't book material and should be made into shorter things. It's just trying not to lose the motivation to keep going, even when you're just so done, because you had this idea and it was so good and you knew it was so good and you had so many people who you knew would just love it, and then you just kept getting denied. You just kept getting a letter back saying, we don't want to publish this. And slowly you just get graded down until you're like, am I actually a good writer? And to be fair, you probably are. You've probably got all the skills you need. I mean, that's how you do it. That's how you find a love of it, is that you just like writing. And loving writing is how you get to be a good writer, and is how you get published eventually. You have a lot of options, and just letting a few denial letters refute that, that's a bad idea. You should just keep trying, and that it's gonna frickin' suck. But when you get to the point where you're like, man, I wish I could give up, that's when you need to go back to where you found out you liked writing, and where you found out that writing was what you wanted to do, and you wanted to show other people what you could do, and how that started. Because more often than not, you find out you like writing in like a school project or something, and you find out that you really like poetry, or you really freaking like fantasy, or maybe you're just someone who really, really likes to read and they want to write their own thing, and that's great. You should always go back to that idea. No amount of refusals or denial letters ought to stop you from remembering, well, I still really like writing, and that's the whole point. Which, yes, sounds really freaking cheesy, but it's also the kind of thing that will help you not lose motivation or determination or just the urge to get it published. And it's just remembering that you like writing. And if you don't, you shouldn't be a writer! It's just that idea that no matter how many denial letters you get, or just how many times you try to publish something and no one really wants to read it, it's just the idea that writing should be what you love. It shouldn't become a job. That's mostly the reasons why people try to be a writer, is because to them it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like a hobby that they could get paid for, and that's why most people try to do it. But it is hard, and it isn't going to come without a struggle, which, I mean, is also why it's sort of a good idea to have a side job maybe in the beginning. But trust me, you'll get there eventually. Most people who want to become a writer and who've gone to school and are like, yes, this is what I want to do, have something published. I mean, even if it's not a best-selling novel, it's still out there, and that's a good thing. Just remembering the fact that you can't be a writer without writing should get you there for the most part. Writers write, and that's sort of how I get motivated all the time, is just being a writer means I need to write. And it's not easy. To be a good writer, you can't really learn that. You have to learn for yourself. It's not something that can be taught. And in a classes just hone your ability. Writing is a gift, and it's something you need to practice. It's a part of you. It's a muscle, really. And a muscle can't get stronger without training. You know? You've gotta write. Writing is what's going to get you there. It's what's gonna push you. It's just looking at a letter of denial and being like, no, this is good enough to get published somewhere. I don't know. If you don't keep trying, you're not gonna get something published. And that's mostly why it's so hard. I mean, it's because trying is hard. I mean, redoing it over and over and over and over and over again just exhausts you and makes you doubt yourself. And that's, I think, where most people fail. So, in conclusion, publishing things is hard. Getting things published is hard. And having the determination to do so is hard. But it's also rewarding. So, thanks for listening to me, for talking for a long time. Let me also tell you that this took a lot of shots because my phone has been running out of data while I've been doing this. So,